Is it true that most of the 206 nations of the world do not regulate agricultural poisons?
The fact is the majority of countries in the world do not have regulatory systems. Or if they do, they are very poor. They can, they're under-resourced. They have no way of actually regulating. They might have regulations, but they're never enforced. And the regulations they have are completely inadequate. And I would argue that the well-resourced countries, such as the United States, Australia, or the countries in the European Union that have better resource regulatory agencies, they aren't properly regulating. They are never going out and checking. They're just saying, as long as the product's used as per the label, it's okay. But they never go out to make sure that the product is being used. Give me an example of where regulators actually go out and check that pesticides are used as per the regulation, and the truth is nowhere. At most, some do test for some of the products to see if the poisons are within the maximum residue level. But as I said, I've never seen one regulator in the world test for all the poisons that they have approved. So it's only ever a small amount, and that tells you nothing about, is the pesticide drifting, going into the water? Is the pesticide going into the wildlife, into the neighbour's farm? There's zero at all, zero monitoring by regulators and enforcement of these problems. And at the moment, these sorts of problems, an example is the drift of dicamba here in the US, end up in the court cases. It's neighbour suing neighbour because there is no regulatory enforcement to make sure there isn't drift.
What influence does the chemical and pesticide industry have over the Environmental Protection Agency and other governmental agencies?
Huge, huge influence because of the revolving door. So if you look at the history of the EPA, very often people who are employed by pesticide companies such as Monsanto end up jobs in senior management or even running the organisation, approving their former employees' chemicals. Then after they're approved, these people now lead the regulator and get jobs as senior vice presidents as a reward for it. We call this the revolving door. That's at management level. At committee level, where the actual committees that sit around and look at the evidence, which is largely studies provided by the pesticide companies, quite a lot of people in those committees actually receive income from pesticide companies, which is a direct conflict of interest. It's a corrupt practice. So the influence is huge, and until this is cleaned up, until there's no revolving door, so there's no financial conflict of interest, there's only independent scientists and researchers working at the regulators, and until the studies that are used are based on the gold standard, which is peer-reviewed, and they are published so that other experts can look at it and check these decisions, no one can trust the regulatory authorities because it's a hidden, corrupt, broken system.
Is there glyphosate in my food and water, and should I care about this?
Yes, and the fact is virtually everyone who is tested will have glyphosate in their blood and urine. It's everywhere. It's the new DDT. It's persistent, and most food that is tested will have it, and most people who are tested will have it. Even to the point where breast milk is tested and it has it. And so babies are being breastfed glyphosate. Now, the governments will say, oh, it's safe because it's below the maximum residue level, which is what they set for safety. However, these, as I said before, this testing is insufficient. And for instance, if you want to talk about glyphosate or Roundup, there is only one study that looks at lifetime exposure to the small amounts of this chemical that we all have, what we call normal environmental exposure. And this is parts per billion. In other words, 100 to 1,000 times lower than what is considered safe. And in that study, when they compared the control rats, which didn't have the glyphosate, to the treated rats that actually got these small amounts. For instance, every treated rat female except for one had mammary tumours. The one that didn't have mammary tumours had an ovarian tumour. But many of the male rats had other types of tumours. And then multiple organ damage, hormone disruption. Virtually every treated rat had damage to the liver and kidneys. And as far as I know, this is the only study looking at a formulated pesticide that's used at the actual amounts that we have in our body over a lifetime exposure. It's the only published one. And so the answer is yes. Be very concerned and look at what you can do to avoid getting glyphosate and any other pesticide in your system.